Russia reduced its investments in US government securities to $9.9 billion, corresponding to only 2% of its international reserves. Why did the central bank sell off a large portion of US government securities? And why is the day when Washington won't be able to cover its huge budget deficit approaching? According to the US Department of the Treasury, in December, Moscow reduced its investments in US government bonds by $1.5 billion, totaling $9.974 billion. According to the Treasury report, this is the lowest value in 12 years. Between August and November, the Bank of Russia gradually acquired US government bonds for 4 consecutive months. In October, purchases amounting to $622 million were made, bringing the total to $10.697 billion. Experts justified these one-off acquisitions with circumstantial issues that do not impact the main strategy of divesting assets in dollars. Since the end of 2018, Moscow has already traded approximately $100 billion in US government bonds. Between 2010 and 2013, Russia's investments in US debt exceeded $170 billion, making Moscow one of the largest holders of US Treasury securities. However, the imposition of sanctions by Washington in April 2014 triggered a reverse process. In 2018, the Russian central bank made a significant asset sale, cutting its US Treasury securities portfolio in half. In the end, the proportion of American titles in international reserves was reduced to a minimum. The resources released by the central bank were reallocated to gold, in addition to the euro and the yuan. According to estimates by the World Gold Council, the amount of precious metal in the balances of global central banks increased by 651 tons last year, marking the largest increase since 1971, when the US abandoned the gold standard. Russia was the top buyer of precious metal in 2019, representing 20% of all purchases destined for state reserves. The central bank increased its gold reserves by 159 tons, reaching a total of 2,270 tons and 56 kilograms. Experts say that by selling American public debt, the central bank is mainly seeking to reduce political risks. Although such actions are, in essence, justified from an economic point of view, the sanctions against national companies had a negative impact on the domestic financial market, causing a shock. In an unfavorable scenario, there could be an asset freeze, something already experienced by Iran. As a preventive measure, authorities decided to reduce dependence on the dollar, making investment in gold a viable alternative in this situation. Most of the gold acquired for the reserves of the Bank of Russia comes from the domestic market, which makes these operations viable without the need to use the US currency. With a complete infrastructure, from extraction to gold processing, Russia demonstrates a logical increase in precious metals reserves. As indicated by Philip Newman, director of the consultancy company Metals Focus, by the end of December, Japan remained the largest holder of US government securities, leading for the 7th consecutive month with $1.15 trillion. In recent years, China was the largest foreign creditor of the American economy. However, due to the trade war, Beijing also began selling these securities. By December 2019, the People's Bank of China reduced its portfolio by almost $20 billion, reaching $1.07 trillion, the lowest value since early 2017. In China, they have repeatedly stated that they consider American debt risky and are decreasing their dollar reserves in favor of Japanese and South Korean currencies. In theory, Beijing could carry out a more comprehensive sale, which would have catastrophic consequences. This would result in a reduction of the treasury value, causing panic in the stock market and devaluing the dollar. Beijing is unlikely to commit to this step, as the devaluation of the US dollar will make Chinese exports more expensive. In addition, the sale of US Treasury bonds will severely limit the ability to control the value of the yuan. The increasing sales of Treasury bonds to central banks around the world do not bring benefits to Americans, considering that the US's trillion-dollar budget deficit is largely financed by the sale of government bonds. In January 2019, the deficit reached its highest level since 2011, with authorities spending $32.6 billion more than they collected. According to Congressional Budget Office projections, the deficit exceeded $1 trillion in this fiscal year. Analysts point out that the reduced interest of foreign creditors in US debt is a consequence of Trump's aggressive protectionist policy. The imminent funding crisis will occur when foreigners stop buying Treasury debt securities and start selling dollar-denominated assets, leading Washington to question the role of the currency as a global reserve.